Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
What is Mythology? Is there really an underground alien base in New Mexico? Are extraterrestrials naughty or nice? Oh, well, okay, welcome to the 914th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, on YouTube, and via TuneIn.com. I am not Ben, but those muted questions came from me. I'm Paul. Today we bring you a new guest with some new views.
Please.
Go ahead. Okay.
Please.
Ben is here.
I am here. I apologize. I was pressing a couple of buttons.
You're doing the producer thing.
It is sometimes in live radio, things happen. And then we move on, and that is what happens.
Right.
So Adam Gorightly has been chronicling fringe culture for 2 decades. His articles have appeared in nearly every zine, underground magazine, countercultural publication, and conspiratorial website imaginable. If I can't stumble over my words. He has dissected everything from the Kennedy assassination to the Manson family to UFOs and beyond. We live in a time when any semi-literate can write a book, and usually does, in my opinion, and my dad's opinion as well. Adam's book comes as a relief. They are all well-written, fun to read, and he connects the dots in ways the few modern author does. Good stuff, whether you agree with it or not, and we're happy to have him with us today on the show. His website is adamgorightly.com. The book, Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks, UFO Disinformation in the Age of Aquarius.
So, Adam Gorightly, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Thanks for having me on, gentlemen.
Oh, hey, it's great to have you with us. You know, it's always fun to kind of have new guests on from time to time, and we try to do that as often as possible. So I guess we'll kind of just hop right into it. Tell us about mutes, and how do you deal with them in your book?
Well, I'm looking at the overall story of the Dulce base, or the legends of the Dulce base, and a big part of that story are the so-called mutes, which is kind of shorthand for cattle mutilations. And so you're asking me how I handle them. I look at the associations with the Dulce base story, and there's a lot of different associations and threads, and the cattle mutilation phenomenon, such as it is just one part of that story and how it relates to Dulce. That's not really answering your question.
We'll get through all that, yeah.
Okay.
So, Dulce, New Mexico, I mean, it's fallen into paranormal urban legend here.
We've been talking about it a lot lately, too, I've noticed.
It keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Alien bases and aliens working with the government people and all. I mean, what's really going on here? One of the themes in your book, books that I really enjoy, are the manipulation of the mythology of UFOs to help to control populations or to work out some agenda that someone else has, and the truth is not out there somewhere. So what is there really anything happening at Dulce, New Mexico, or is it just a ploy of some kind?
Well, there were things happening at one time or another. Whether there's any secret facilities there now doesn't seem to be the case from folks I talked to, but in the 70s there was a lot of strangeness going on, and we need to step back and look at where this legend or these stories came from, and that goes back to the Benowitz affair.
I was going to ask you about Benowitz, yeah.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, let's go back there for a few minutes and kind of lay that out and how that is connected to the whole Dulce base story. So Paul Bennewitz, for your listeners who don't know, he was a physicist, a government contractor, had his own business by the name of Thunder Dynamics, and they basically provided and invented different like sensing devices and stuff for aircraft, avionics, that type of stuff. So he's kind of a mad genius guy, and he was also interested in UFOs and cattle mutes. He was a member of APRO, that UFO organization, during that period. The time frame here is we're looking at the late 1970s. And so where he lived was right adjacent to Kirtland Air Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where a lot of stuff was going on during that period. You also have Sandia Labs there, which were involved in a lot of these secret projects, as well as something called the Monsanto Weapons Area. And so, what the Monsanto Weapons Area was this, they housed the largest cache of nuclear weapons components probably in the world during that period in the late 70s. And, of course, it was also an Air Force base. So, anywho, Benowitz started seeing UFOs over the facilities, or what he perceived to be UFOs. They were like nothing he had ever seen. And specifically, they were over the Monsanto weapons area, which got him kind of concerned. He started filming these things, and he also set up this array of listening equipment, and he started picking up all these odd signals and stuff that he was trying to decode. And over time, he grew to believe that, this was the aliens that were behind this for a number of reasons. He grew to believe this. Like I said, he started filming, taking photos, and capturing these signals, and he brought it to the attention of the security there at Kirtland to let him know that, he considered it a national security threat. Even met with the generals and whatnot there. But they didn't seem to be taking him seriously. He started firing off a number of letters to prominent politicians, and even put together something called a Project Beta report that outlined what he considered this alien menace and how to deal with it. And at Kirtland during that period, there was a lot of like I said, secret projects going on with stealth technology, aircraft. A lot was going on during that period, and also it was later revealed a secret program called Project Starfire that was basically had to do with laser communications, secret communications, where you could talk to satellites and maybe screw with other satellites from other countries. So this, it appears, was what Benowitz was picking up on, that he determined, or that he suspected were UFOs, and that entered into this situation a fellow named Richard Doty, who was with the AFOSI based out of Kirtland. AFOSI is Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Basically, he was one of the investigators that were put on the Benowitz to deal with Benowitz as part of a counterintelligence operation, because they were concerned. And of course, there's different interpretations of this story, and but from the perspective of the government, they were concerned that he would leak this information about these secret craft, these signals he was picking up to potentially foreign adversaries. So they wanted to see what he was up to, and during this time they also fed him some phony documents that kind of bolstered his theory that there was aliens interacting with that base, or potentially threatening that base. And the alien angle was part of the motive here was to discredit Benowitz. So that's kind of where how does Dulce come into this? I'll jump into that next, unless you have any questions at this point.
Well, I just wanted to point out that having in my own military experience, underground bases are not unusual. people hear underground bases, they go, aha, some kind of crazy conspiracy thing. That's not right either, because history is full of conspiracies. But in any case, I think that it's very plausible that there could have been a base there, certainly, or was, but what it was used for, that's another question entirely. In Chapter 6 of your excellent book, Adam, you point out that something else I learned in the military, that accurate information can be released from inaccurate sources deliberately, and vice versa, and that keeps everybody guessing, and is one way. Well, once they learned in the 60s you really can't keep secrets, you have to use disinformation, then that was really a tool that was used. So one of the questions we want to address on the show here is, as you've begun to do, is the whole UFO mythology or fact or whatever there is. It tends to be mixed up with accurate and inaccurate information, and who really controls that, or does anyone?
Well, in the case of Benowitz, I think that's exactly what happened. And according to different sources, that's what Doty eventually got in trouble for, was that, he was seeding Benowitz with some disinformation, but among the disinformation there was some actual real information, classified information, and the reason they were leaking it to Benowitz and other, there was UFO researchers involved with this, like Bill Moore, for instance, was to put that information out there along with the disinformation, and basically, put it into the ufological community. And you got to keep in mind, during this period, there was with the different UFO groups, with MUFON and whatnot, there was a lot of civilian contractors who were also interested in the UFO subject, that also worked on secret projects, So that was kind of the interest of spies, foreign nationals that were starting to infiltrate some of these UFO groups. And the idea there was they'd leak this information, little bits and pieces that were factual and some that was disinformation, approach, seed it to different UFO researchers, some who were working as assets, for the government, such as Bill Moore. He admitted that, pass that information on to people in the UFO committees and see how it was responded to, basically to see if other people had picked up on certain aspects of this, different intel that was out there. For instance, show them a picture of a supposed UFO that was actually stealth technology and see what their reaction was. If they'd say, "Oh, I know what that type of craft is. It's not a UFO, and it has this type of a weapons system and whatnot." And also, once again, to seed false stories to kind of muddy the waters, so everybody was confused about, what was actually going on at some of these facilities, like Kirtland, where, a lot of this stealth aircraft development was going on. If that long-winded answer makes any sense to you.
Oh, no, it does. It does. Thank you, Adam. We have a question from Peter Shelley. Peter is one of our guest co-hosts now and then, and he's from South America, and he has two questions for our guest.
Indeed, he does. I always look forward to his questions. Always
very thoughtful questions. Yes.
Indeed. So Peter writes to us, first, have you spoken with Greg Valdez, son of the police officer Gabe Valdez, who personally investigated the mystery surrounding Dulce? If so, what did you learn?
Yes, I learned quite a bit. Let's put a pin in that, and I'll talk about what I learned from Greg Valdez in just a second.
Okay.
Yeah, sure thing. We can kind of put it. We can put that on hold, shove it in the parking lot, and wait to kind of deal with it.
Well, I want a little background on how Dulce enters into the story with Benowitz, and as well Gabe Valdez. So in 1980, there was a lady named Myrna Hansen who claimed that she witnessed a UFO in Eagle Nest, New Mexico, with her son. And the UFO beamed like a light down a tractor beam and sucked up a cow into the ship. And Hansen claimed that she and her son also got tractor beamed up into the ship, where they saw this alien of some sorts dissecting this cow, a weird form of cattle mutilation. And afterwards, this hysterical young lady, Myrna Hansen, she was in her mid-20s at the time. She contacted the local authorities there in Eagle Nest, and they didn't know how to deal with this, so they contacted Gabe Valdez, the father of Greg Valdez. Valdez, during this period, this was in the 80s and like through the mid-70s onward, he was kind of the go-to guy in New Mexico for cattle mutilations and weird things in the sky. He was a state trooper there. And Gabe Valdez had become friends with Paul Bennewitz, and he contacted Benowitz because he didn't know how to deal with this situation either, and told her about this young woman who had this encounter. And Benowitz got involved, and he brought in Leo Sprinkle, another kind of famous name here in ufology, who'd been the last few years doing hypnotic regressions associated with the APRO and different groups. And so they ended up doing a regression of Myrna Hansen. And
hypnotic regression.
Hypnotic regression at Benowitz's house, and he had a brand new 1979 Lincoln Town Car, which he was basically wrapped it in a couple layers of foil because he was concerned about the aliens interfering, sending some type of beam that would mess up their regression session. Anyway, what Hansen went on to describe was her initial experience where she went aboard an alien ship, saw that dissection. There was some type of medical experiment that went on. And they continued to regress her over a series of few days, and she started having these memories of being transported at one time or another to an alien base where she once again underwent some type of medical procedure at the hands of the aliens. And at some point she broke free in the facility and started seeing some of the classic tropes now that are in UFO lore, with the vats with alien hybrid babies and whatnot. And due to this information, Benowitz, for one reason or another, began to suspect that the actual base was at Dulce, New Mexico, and that kind of started the legend here. He fired off, I was talking about, he was contacting different politicians, and a couple things he said in a letter planted the seeds for Dulce base. One claim was he had was that there had been a secret treaty between the U.S. government and the aliens, to exchange technology. The aliens would exchange technology in return for human experiments, people to experiment upon. And another thing in one of the documentations early on, this is 81 or so, he claimed that there had been some type of confrontation at this Dulce base, and the humans there, military types, either abandoned the base or they were killed. He also stated that he was developing, close to finishing, a ray gun that would destroy the aliens, some pretty wild stuff. But I'll now share some information that Greg Valdez shared with me. Greg, during these days, he was he wasn't even in the 80s. He wasn't quite a teenager, still a young preteen, but he would go off with Gabe on a lot of his cattle mute investigations and whatnot. So he had a good idea of what Gabe was involved in all of this. And one of the stories he related to me also initially came from Greg Bishop in his book Project Beta. And this was information that Greg got, first we're talking Greg Bishop here, got from Bill Moore, who was involved in this whole crazy affair. And Moore claimed that he was with J. Allen Hynek of Project Blue Book fame during this period. They were having some adult beverages somewhere. And Hynek said that he had passed along a computer to Paul Bennewitz that allegedly had software you could talk to the aliens with. Pretty crazy sounding stuff here, but as it turned out, the software was actually embedded by the U.S. Air Force, and I think as a way to monitor Benowitz's activity, once again as part of this counterintelligence affair. And so allegedly he could talk to the aliens through this computer, and there's also some very primitive, like computer dot matrix imagery of what the aliens looked like. Kind of, some of them were reptilians. Others, Benowitz, way back during that period, was already calling grays. Saying, see how a lot of this material potentially influenced ufology. But so initially, Greg Bishop was the source of that story, and during this period, Hynek was indeed still working on different projects for the Air Force. Now, Greg Valdez and Gabe Valdez visited Benowitz at one time, and Greg confirmed that he actually witnessed Benowitz using this computer to talk to the aliens or received messages. It wasn't like they were just vocally talking to each other. Other people who reviewed the messages were like, is this really aliens? But even Richard Doty, who is a spurious source at times, claimed that he was with Benowitz and watching him use this computer to communicate with the aliens. And so what that most likely was, was, if indeed all this happened, there's, different sources for it, was a way to monitor Benowitz's activity with, a computer. Who knows what else that computer had in it to monitor and listen in on Benowitz during this period, but also to further promote this narrative with Benowitz that there was indeed this activity going on with an alien base, and that the alien base was located at Dulce. Now, there's also evidence, you talk about underground facilities, there's also evidence of an underground facility at Kirtland Air Force Base. So the intent of all this seemed was to basically divert Benowitz's attention to what was going on to from Kirtland to Dulce, where they could, as part of this counterintelligence campaign, easily stage different things to make it appear there was some type of alien underground base there.
Okay.
A lot to chew on, but
Indeed. Now, I think the second part of the second question that Peter has sent gets into that. However, we're coming up on our break. Can we take our break a little early?
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay. We'll take our mid-show break. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM, 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley with our great guest today, Adam Gorightly. We shall be right back, so stick with us.
The night is alive. Join us and take a walk on the weird side when you tune in to the Kingdom of Nye, hosted by Heather Wade, the finest in late night talk. Listen live free weeknights starting at 9 p.m. Pacific time at thekingdomofnye.com, talkstreamlive.com, and the Paranormal Radio app. Wanna take a ride?
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
And welcome back. It's Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON AM and FM radio. And we have Adam Gorightly with us today. We're talking about a lot of weird stuff having to do with UFOs, conspiracies, and manipulation of UFO mythologies, things of this kind. It's pretty interesting stuff. Ben, did you want to pose the second question that Peter asked? Because actually, I think we kind of get into that in the last.
We did. So I guess we're slowly but surely getting around to your questions, Peter. We'll hop right into it. Which Peter writes, you discovered that the story of the alleged Dulce base guard Thomas Costello was a fiction. Did you learn if the alleged Dulce base alien abduction cases of such women as Myrna Hansen and Krista Tilton were also fiction?
Well, that's the $64,000 question there, and no, I don't know for sure. With Myrna Hansen, it's kind of an interesting story with her. She basically, after all of this happened, kind of disappeared. Nobody knows what, there was stories about her moving to California, and I think actually Gabe Valdez was deeply looking into a lot of these different rumors and whatnot associated with Dulce to see if he could pin down, the fact, separate the fact from the fiction, separate the wheat from chaff. And he did indeed, Gabe Valdez did indeed confirm that the Thomas Costello story was fiction, and later Phil Schneider picked up on, he promoted the same story that he had worked in an underground base and had been involved in a shoot 'em up with the aliens. As for Myrna Hansen, once again, nobody really knew what became of her, and I began to question, was Myrna Hansen really her name? And in my conversations with Greg Valdez, he suggested the distinct possibility that Myrna Hansen was also part of this counterintelligence program, which starts to make a bit of sense if you really think about it, that she was, like a spy that was put in the middle of this to further promote these stories of aliens and divert Benowitz's attention towards whatever was going on out there at Dulce. And I also, write a bit about Krista Tilton in the book as well, and she as well might have been playing a similar role. Okay. But that's another topic, getting into the whole Krista Tilton story. That could be a whole show.
Okay, well, perhaps it will be. All right, let's move on to another notion that you deal with too in your books. And now, Ben and I often are invited to speak at UFO conferences. Not so much ghost and paranormal types, because we're bad for business. We question all their theories, so they don't really like us very much. But the UFO people, and we're on these panels with some of the big names, and they go down the line and they speak learnedly about disclosure, the notion that the government should be cajoled or otherwise convinced to just tell what they know about UFOs. And they get to us, and we say, show of hands, who believes what the government says? And the whole audience will groan and moan, And so that I think is a problem from our point of view, that whatever is released, if anything, it won't necessarily be accurate. It'll have an agenda. It'll have, and you really can't trust it. Plus the fact that there is no the government. It's a bunch of competing agencies, some of which may know something, the turf and all this business. And nobody's really in charge. So, what say you on the notion of disclosure? And I'm thinking particularly of the part of your book where you talk about the story that Steven Spielberg, before he made Close Encounters, met with Ronald Reagan, and the whole notion that Hollywood is preparing us for disclosure. What say you on all that? Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's just another story, it seems, but it was intertwined. A lot of these same narratives get rolled out over a period of time by the same people, and that was one of them that that basically had to do with this secret exchange program with the ETs. And, that's a story that really dates back or started bubbling up through, people looking into Roswell and the release of the MJ-12 papers that talked about this secret treaty arrangement between humans and aliens, and that there was an alien in captivity. And where did these documents come from? It goes back to, it appears that, they were fed to Bill Moore, and he didn't know exactly, but they came from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and, a lot of people suspect that Richard Doty had a hand in this, promoting these what turned out to be bogus documents, the MJ-12 documents. And so there's kind of this cast of characters. I just say Doty, but there's a number that have been involved in pushing this narrative. In every decade or so, they kind of roll it out again in a different type of, with a little tweaks here and there, but we saw it once again rolled out in the mid-2000s with the Serpo story, which it was later revealed by some internet sleuths that Doty was also intimately involved with. I don't know if that even came close to answering your question, but there it is.
Oh, yeah, there's so much information here. But regarding, I'm thinking back to our old mutual friend Stanton Friedman, always receiving sort of anonymous documents, including the MJ-12 documents and this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Anonymous letters are fraught with peril, obviously. So how much of this information do you think has come from anonymous sources as opposed to accurate or known accurate or inaccurate sources? Stan Friedman seemed to accept a lot about the Majestic 12 documents.
Mm-hmm.
Could you say more about those documents for those who might not know, and how legitimate they may be, whether anonymous or not?
Well, there was a whole series of documents that came out of the Benowitz affair that were pretty dodgy, and later, were exposed by different UFO researchers to be bogus. As far as the MJ-12 documents, how those were rolled out in 1984. Now, wow, all kinds of noise going on in my neighborhood here.
Uh-oh. The aliens are trying to disrupt the show.
So Bill Moore was central to all this, and he was a up-and-coming researcher way back in the late 70s, 80s, and he wrote and this was based on research. He and Stanton Friedman were research partners, and eventually published the Roswell incident about these alleged Roswell crash that happened, back in 1947. And so that was 1979-80. That book came out. Around that same time, Moore was approached by a Intel official, high level apparently, who went by the name of Falcon, and approached him basically with the offer, if you help us keep an eye on people in ufology, report back to us what they are up to. We can, in exchange, feed you, top secret poop on UFOs, classified information, perhaps, and that Doty will be your conduit for this information. So Doty was, there from the beginning. So jump forward a few years, 84, these documents pop up. They just appear from anonymous source on the doorstep of Jamie Chandray. He was a research partner with Bill Moore during this period. And all of these documents appeared to confirm, they were basically briefing documents, supposedly, with this group named MJ-12. MJ-12 were these different government officials that were briefing Eisenhower on, once again, the Roswell crash and, information on ETs and ET and captivity, and all of this material basically confirmed, what was published in Bill Moore's book a few years before that, and so. Well, that's basically the MJ-12 documents. The FBI actually looked into it, and they confirmed they were bogus. I know some people say, well, the FBI was covering stuff up, but, a lot of researchers looked into that, during the period and years to come, and, there's, they look fishy to me. There's a lot of questions with them as far as how they conform to actual government documents. And, of course, there's the Stanton Freemans of the world who stood by them till the end. But, of course, he had a hound in that hunt.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Could you tell us, let's take a moment to talk about your book, your books, your website, where people can find out more.
So, yeah, I've written a bunch of books over the years. You can find all of them, most of them, at Amazon.com, of course. They run the gamut, I've written a couple of books on UFOs, one with my buddy Greg Bishop called A is for Adamski, the Golden Age of the UFO Contactees, if you guys are familiar with that. Kind of fun.
Joe Ferrier was right on this station with us.
Kind of a who's who of the old school, contactees. And then there's this book, Saucer, Spooks, and Kooks. But I've written on, conspiracies, quote unquote, a book on the Manson family, or in colorful characters like Kerry Thornley in my book, The Prankster and the Conspiracy. And so, yeah, it's kind of a wide range of stuff I'm interested in. UFOs, paranormal, conspiracy theories, consciousness, counterculture, psychedelics, all that fun kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's good. And as I say, I love the way you write. And I'm an editor professionally, and I don't give compliments easily. But in any case, you're welcome. Let's get back to talking about, in Chapter 21, you deal with the Crestone Manifesto, or Creston, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Crestone.
Can you tell us about that? John Lear and all those fun guys.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that also plays into this, the mythos of the Dulce story. So the Crestone conference, I first heard about, as I was digging into all this stuff, an interview with Bill Moore from 1994. He was on with Don Ecker when Don Ecker had a radio show back then, and they got to talking about, the ETs, the Greys, the mythos surrounding all of this, what was true and false, and to step back a little bit, in 1989, and I will get to the Crestone Conference, in 1989, Bill Moore basically at the MUFON conference in Las Vegas spilled the beans about his involvement with Benowitz and that whole affair, and he had admitted that he had worked as an informant, I guess is the best way you could say it, an unpaid informant, and he made that deal that basically kind of keep an eye on ufology in exchange for top secret UFO information. But he basically spilled the beans on this at the MUFON conference, admitted it, and pointed to the likes of John Ler. He didn't name Ler specifically in his lecture, but he was obviously talking about John Ler and other people who he felt had taken the Benowitz story and now were running with it and embellishing upon it and taking it to ridiculous levels. So he felt the community needed to know, and he basically ran out of the conference hall that night. If there had been tomatoes and vegetables for sale, they probably would have been hurling them at him. So anyway, there's that part of the story. So in this jump ahead to 94 on this radio program, he said that all of this, the Dulce story, was really, it came together at this Crestone conference in 1984, which wasn't a full-blown UFO conference. It was just some of the key players in ufology during that period getting together and, just kind of meet and talk about the current state of ufology. And out of this, once again, according to Moore, came this whole Dulce mythos. So I was researching, I couldn't find out much about this conference until, the last few years when I got to know David Perkins, who ended up writing the intro to my book. Mm-hmm. And he was there at that conference. It was just like a dozen. Linda Moulton Howe was there, and John Lear was now an up-and-comer in ufology, a few other people, and Lear was got everybody together one day, and he said he wanted to put together this manifesto to talk about the current state of ufology. And they put their heads together, and they could agree that, one with the cattle mutilations, they felt that this group that included Perkins and Tom Adams, cattle mutilation researchers were there as well, that UFOs were somehow associated with the cattle mutilation phenomena. That's as far as they go, but Lear wanted to take it further and claim that there was indeed an alien invasion going on, and put out this type of statement or manifesto, and everybody backed off at that point. And it's not John, that seems like a bit too much. But Lear kind of ran with this, and he was heavily getting into Dulce during this period, and also his what he was not his belief, but maybe his belief, but what he was promoting was that indeed, there was this secret treaty with the aliens in exchange for technology, but he went even further, that this was part of a alien invasion, that they were breeding these alien hybrid babies, this alien race, because they were dying race, and that these aliens were also drinking the precious bodily fluids of human babies, and all this wild stuff that came out in something called the Ler Statement, which I think he was fishing for at this Crestone conference to get more people to sign in. But this became a thing in like 89 or so when he released this statement. It kind of took ufology by storm during that period, and he linked all of this to the Dulce base. You may remember there's been different names for it, the Ler Statement or whatever, that was basically released during that period through different user groups. This was kind of at the very early stages of the internet, and it went viral and became a big meme within ufology, and I think, became a big influence on the media too, and shows like the X-Files that wove in a lot of these different elements to the story. Ler went on to meet Paul Bennewitz around this period, 88 or so, spent a few days at Benowitz's home, after which Benowitz disconnected his phone and kind of disappeared from ufology. Different researchers, and I suspect this to be the case, like Christian Lambright, is convinced something went on there with Ler and Benowitz that once again was the reason that Benowitz left ufology, and the high probability that Ler latched on to a lot of Benowitz's actual materials and documentation during that period, and went on to promote the Dulce-based mythos.
Okay, I have about 100 more questions, but Ben, you've been sitting here quietly. Did you?
I'm taking it all in, and I always like to take a few minutes and kind of sort of take everything that we've heard and try and formulate a well thought out question. Sometimes it's well thought out, and sometimes it's not. And maybe this one it might be right in the middle. So
I'll let you know.
Thank you. You know what? I appreciate constructive criticism. I think it's really interesting that I've heard the word mythology and mythos used a lot in this whole conversation, and that fascinates me because I've been playing with this really fun definition of mythology, which is not so much, it's a fiction, it's just something that happened before, and we, attribute things to it that are like, well, we can't really figure out what it is, so let's just attribute it to some sort of force outside ourselves. Rather, the definition I've been playing with is a story that we participate in, that we're all kind of a part of, right? So we're all a part of a mythos in some way, shape, or form, right? Whether you want to throw in, I don't know, let's say a Christian mythos, or you want to throw in, if you want to make it more modern, a fandom, if you will, which is, we participate going to movies, we, get into costumes, we participate in this story of, Star Wars, Star Trek, whatever. I think it's really interesting that there's this sort of mythology of ufology. I did not mean for that to rhyme, but now that'll stick in your heads,
it's good.
The mythology of ufology, which is, it's so hard to pin down because, the story is always changing. So the story that we're participating in is constantly changing. And one of the really interesting things that I've found from this is the manipulation of that story over time. Now, my question is this. There's sort of two camps that have been sort of divided into over the last, decade or so. You have your nuts and bolts, traditional, these are craft that come from, the Andromeda galaxy, X amount of light years away. And then you have the people that are more, well, it's a spiritual thing. They're these higher beings that are technologically and spiritually advanced, and they want to help us. And you find some of these narratives, especially like, the Dulce one's really interesting because it doesn't really fall into either of those camps, and it's really hard to pin down. Now, in your opinion, with the state of sort of the mythology of ufology, where do you think it's going to go from here?
The field of ufology? My God, that's a weighty question. I don't know.
25 words or less.
I can't predict. Well, you see, the same stories get retreaded all the time, so I would suspect they'll continue to retread a lot of this stuff. For instance, the so-called metamaterials or memory metals or stuff retrieved from crash saucers, it's still a big topic that in current day UFO disclosure, I mean, that was a big part of the TTSA story, that there was possibly some weird materials they were looking at. Bigelow modified a facility in Las Vegas to look at this stuff, but if you trace this story, back in ufology, it really started with one of the first accounts, which was kind of a dubious story to begin with, having to do with the Maury Island affair, where there was, they called it slag that rained down from these UFOs. You hear the story again connected to Roswell with the so-called memory medals. Go jump forward a little bit, and Art Bell in the mid-'90s or later 90s got a letter from a guy whose dad supposedly worked on the Roswell crash with the military, and he had these Art's parts that he sent to Art Bell. Art shared them around to a few people. I think Bigelow got a hold of some during that period, and it's a narrative Bigelow and people associated with him who have also been associated with the aviary and NIDS and John Alexander and all these kind of spooky types. They were looking at some material, a couple decades ago that it could have been Art's parts, it could have been a number of stuff. Linda Moulton Howe got a hold of that. She actually, according to reports, sold some of that to Tom DeLonge to the tune of around $30,000. And so where's ufology going? I'm sure we'll hear in the future this latest thing about metamaterials will die out, but then 10 years from now it'll come back. There'll be alien autopsies will come back. Crash saucers are always there, crash retrievals. Lou Elizondo mentioned crash retrievals the other day, and all of a sudden UFO Twitter blew up with people who had never really, we don't seem to know the history of these stories.
Context is really important, and I'm coming across as a pretty skeptical, cynical type, but
Well, you have to be, I think.
Right? Yeah, you gotta. That's the problem with narratives, right? They take on a life of their own over time.
Well, we're just about out of time, but one brief observation with the alleged disclosures from the Pentagon over the past year or so, which has been covered by national news outlets, things of this kind. We're hearing from a lot of people who want to tell their stories because now they feel it's okay, all right, because it's on the national news. So I think that might be one change we might be seeing.
Okay, yeah.
Perhaps so. Maybe that's good. But give us your website one more time, please, Adam.
AdamGorightly.com, and also I started a blog semi-recently, the last couple of years, more devoted to UFOs, kind of to promote these last couple books, that's called Chasing UFOs. So if you plug that into Google or whatever, you can see some of the stuff. And there's like a lot of documentation and files and stuff that I wasn't able to include, like in the some of these books and extra materials that I post on this Chasing UFO blog.
Excellent.
Cool.
Great discussion, Adam. Paranormal Renaissance man, folks. Adam Gorightly. Check him out.
Thank you much.
Okay. So let's get to our announcements. On Friday, October 8th, I'll present a paranormal overview. It's going to be the program Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong, at a venue that's kind of unusual for me, the Arizona Dowsers Conference at the Little America Hotel in Flagstaff. Visit dowserssouthwest.com for more information. This is an in-person event, but you have to register for the thing. On Thursday, October 21st at 7 p.m., I'll be back at the Haverhill Public Library in Haverhill, Massachusetts, to present on Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong. Boy, this is going to be an easy season for me, just off-the-shelf programs here. This is scheduled to be an in-person event, but stay tuned.
Alrighty, and we'll present once again at the Western Connecticut UFO Conference during the last week of October this year. On Sunday the 24th, we'll do a live simulcast with the conference. This will be an open-line show format with Kathleen Martin taking questions from conference participants and our global audience on the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case, of which 2021 is the 60th anniversary. On that following Saturday, COVID variants permitting, we'll present live at the Danbury, Connecticut Public Library to help wrap up the conference. Other presenters that week will include Mark D'Antonio, Tom Reed, Michael Schratt, Linda Zimmerman, and Mike Panicello from Connecticut MUFON.
After years of technical difficulties, all regular recorded radio broadcasts of Behind the Paranormal from CBS Radio, Achieve Radio, and here on WOON AM and FM have been restored in the archives at BehindTheParanormal.com. Also fully restored are the Return to Rendlesham series from 2010-2011 on CBS Radio. All related shows, along with the Achieve Radio monthly 2-hour specials from 2009. We're still working on some other special shows and podcasts, but most of the stuff is there at BehindTheParanormal.com, and it's scattered around on the iTunes and other platforms as well, Apple Podcasts, etc., YouTube.
And Spotify.
Yeah, you're amazed where you find us. In addition, our show now has its own app. It's bare bones, but it's free. What do you want for nothing? Right now, it's just got most of our past shows on it. We plan to add features as we go, so check that out. All right, what do we have for next week, Ben?
So, next week, that's October 3rd, we'll bring you an open line show to tackle the mountains of questions on all sorts of paranormal topics. You name it, and we will probably end up discussing it.
Yeah, we'll have a special guest co-host, too. We leave you today with another thought from For Our Times from the Irish-born 18th century British essayist and parliamentarian, Sir Edmund Burke. Nobody makes a greater mistake than the one who does nothing because he can do only a little. I'm Paul Eno.
I'm Ben Eno, and we still have a couple of seconds left. And, funnily enough, I quote Sir Edmund Burke a lot. Amazing statesman, politician. If you've never had a chance to really do some looking into him, highly recommended. Especially since a lot of his stuff is very, very relevant to the modern
his
day.
main point is people get the government they deserve.
Exactly. And on that delightful note, I'm Ben, and thank you for joining us on our great cosmic journey. And we shall see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal.